Welcome to Textural Anthologies, the podcast series that explores the personal and professional side of creative individuals. My name is Massimo Casagrande, and in the second series, I will be continuing my informal conversations with friends, colleagues, and fellow creatives to discover more about their stories, their journey, what makes them tick, and above all, their creative outlets. Today's creative boundaries are blurred more than ever, and in the second series, we will explore how creativity is influenced and inspired by other disciplines, and how, through developments in technology, social media, and new business strategies, the creative industry is evolving. Enjoy the episode. Today's guest is a disability designer and advocate who launched her own brand, Unhidden Clothing, in 2017. Besides being an ex-student of mine, she's someone I'm really proud of. She has been a disability advocate due to her own gastrointestinal disabilities, and her career as a garment technologist in fashion led her to start Unhidden when she encountered so many issues with her fellow hospital patients not being able to cover up or be comfortable in their own clothing and the lack of stylish adaptive clothing available. Join me today as we discuss more about adaptive fashion, how the world is slowly waking up to ableism, understanding the true worth of spending power of those with disabilities, and how Unhidden can help people with disabilities enjoy fashion. I'm really happy to welcome today's guest, Victoria Jenkins. Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thank you. Victoria, you are a disability designer and advocate with your company Unhidden. You create accessible work attire, and Unhidden Clothing was founded with the vision of bringing exclusivity, style, and sustainability to adaptive fashion. Can you tell us a bit more about starting Unhidden Clothing?
So Unhidden it came about from my own experience being in hospital and seeing a woman opposite me who couldn't access her own body and then also couldn't dress for it. So it kind of sparked the idea of looking into what adaptive fashion is and what it would mean to do that. And in my career as a garment technologist, my whole job has been around garment construction. And what I found in 2016 just wasn't very inspiring. It wasn't very fashion forward. And a lot of it was kind of based on the assumption that people with disabilities weren't in work. So there was no professional sort of clothing available. So I started researching it. I've spoken to as many different people in the community as I can. I try and cover as many disabilities as I can within each item of clothing. I'm not sure the exclusivity sort of idea, I don't know how that comes across. It's more, I'm trying to give a level of luxury to adaptive fashion that I feel has been missing. So using the word exclusive is more to be fashionable, to be style-led, and to become part of the fashion industry rather than sort of excluding anybody from the range. I mean, non-disabled people are more than welcome to buy it as well, because the adaptations themselves are mostly hidden. Like, you can't see what I've done to make the garment adaptive. That is not immediately obvious. So in that respect, people are then not othered. They're not wearing clothing that makes them very obviously adaptive, or not from the same sort of fashion trends in terms of that.
What is adaptive fashion?
Basically, it's disabled fashion, because most people don't realise that that's what adaptive means, including the disabled community. So, I mean, in literal sense, it's clothing adapted to specific bodies. So wheelchair users, people with dexterity issues, people with stomas and ileostomies, people that are fed via various tubes. It's all just to include those kind of issues, especially as well as mobility.
Well, as you mentioned, your past, you studied fashion design in London. You worked for brands like All Saints, Jack Wills, Victoria Beckham as a garment technologist. In other words, construction of clothes. So this is perfect. You do have the knowledge, you know how to tweak the patterns and make all the changes. So I'm sure this is very helpful when you're designing Unhidden. How do you adapt the patterns? Do you contact the people and ask them questions?
It's been difficult, especially when last year was really where we moved forward with a lot of the designs. It's based on a lot of conversations of what they need, but it's also, I mean, because, it's quite hard to sort of rock up to anybody and just say, can I talk to you about all of your clothes, please? So it's been a lot of online conversations, but I've just sat myself and gone, right, if I was sitting and if I was always sitting, what would I need doing to these clothes? And then when it comes to sort of stomach issues, my own experiences mean that I understand tube access and stomas and sort of surgical swelling and bloating and all of that. And then dexterity issues, they've actually been widely addressed, or at least commented on, the fact that magnets is sort of the biggest adaptive accessory that you will see used in clothing. It's not fully accessible, because then anyone with a pacemaker can't wear these clothing, and they can't wear it in a hospital setting either. Not that that's necessarily what everything's for. So it's been a lot of that. And then like the shoot itself was when I got the real in-life feedback, because people were trying them on, and I made the whole shoot samples, they were all made in different sizes so that I wasn't also just trying on one size body.
And what was their reaction?
I kept sort of having to go and hide behind a screen with very emotional tears because there was a lot of gratitude, but it was also a lot of excitement because these people they'd never been included in these conversations. They'd never worn these clothes. I mean, one of the models hadn't worn a dress in 10 years. So she had a dress that not only she could wear, but she didn't have to lift it up to reach any of her catheters or tubes. There's a zip that she could reach everything easily through that. So it was really powerful, but it was really it was mostly happy. And then I think for me, there was just a frustration of I don't think by any means I'm the front runner. There are other companies doing it, but I still had that frustration of there are other brands with bigger and better resources that's still not including this incredible group of people.
Preparing for meeting you today and speaking with you today, I was doing research and I came across some numbers which really shocked me, to be honest. So over the past few years, we've all been focusing on sustainability, resale. The secondhand market is booming and it's expected to reach $64 billion in 2028.
Yeah.
This is great. Fantastic environmentally for garment workers and everybody. But I was also reading that there was some bodies were left out of this movement. People weren't considering disabilities. It's an afterthought. And again, just reading this article and finding out that, is it called the purple pound in the UK?
Yes, spending power, yeah.
But they forecasted that the global market for adaptive fashion is expected to reach $400 billion by 2026. That is more than the secondhand retail.
Yeah. And that's actually just the UK because the actual spending power globally is already 1 trillion.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah. Just this huge market. It's from a brand perspective, it actually financially doesn't make sense to exclude this group.
What actions are being taken to sort of raise awareness of this?
I'm a brand ambassador for Models of Diversity, it's completely linked to what I'm doing with Unhidden. It comes back to education. If people with disabilities are not able to study fashion and design and therefore be included in the room and in the conversation, then there's also whether they're being hired in fashion companies and being given those opportunities, or if brands simply invite some people with disabilities of a range of disabilities into their design rooms and have these conversations and go from there, because it's a collaborative approach. It's representation still, brands are not doing it.
Another figure that took me by surprise was the fact that 80% of disabled people are not born with disabilities, and also not all disabilities are visible. So we kind of tend to forget this.
Yes. Yeah. And that's why I think representation is really hard within that, because I myself have invisible disabilities, but they do apply to my clothing. And actually, even the same with people that are neurodiverse, they need things with different seams and finishes. So there's a whole heap of people that are not being included. And then it's also, the disabled group is the largest marginalized group in the world. It's also the only group that literally anybody could become a part of overnight. You could have an accident, could get sick, you could be part of that community in the blink of an eye. So that's why, for me, the sustainable side of what Unhidden is doing is important, because people shouldn't have to throw away their wardrobes because suddenly they no longer fit them or they make them uncomfortable. So that's why we're trialing an alteration service as well, so that we can adapt people's existing clothes, because that's also important.
Absolutely. And when you said sustainable, I know you also using dead stock fabrics, right?
Yes. Which is why the launch collection is only in black and white, because they are the easier to source fabrics. Hopefully we'll be able to add some colour in and some prints. But yeah, it might be that sometimes we can only make X amount in a particular colour or fabric at that time, so that in that respect kind of does make it a bit exclusive. But that's why we're trying not to use anything too damaging to the environment. If I end up using any kind of polyester, I think I would then, with the garments, I would include those bags that catch all the microfibers, because not everybody buys those, but that would again sort of counteract the fact that I'm still using polyester. But polyester is really durable, so it is really good for giving longevity to clothes, especially in the adaptive sphere, because they have a lot more tension in different areas and sort of need to be quite hard wearing.
Where do you go to source these dead stock factories? Do you contact brands or textile mills and ask them?
I'm very lucky that my the factory in Bulgaria that I work with, and sort of I would call her my colleague, Laura Jean, who is a sustainable designer. She does the sourcing for me. I source the feel and the weight and tell her that's what I'm hoping that she'll be able to find. And then she and the team in Bulgaria, she's actually London based, although she is in Bulgaria at the moment. and they then find it.
You actually mentioned someone to me to look up. Her name is Alex Darcy.
Yes.
And her Instagram is Wheelchair Rapunzel. The reason why you mentioned her to me was because I was actually quite shocked the last time that you and I spoke, that you were telling me that there's this underside of social media and disabled bodies, that you've had problems with Facebook or Instagram where they've reported your posts.
Yeah. Well, they've just sort of said these products you can't sell because I've used a medical term and they think that I'm trying to sell something medical when really I'm just describing a condition that the garments would help. So that's the problem I've had and multiple other people have. But the bigger problem is the censorship of disabled bodies across Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. They all do it. And Alex Darcy is one of the biggest examples of this. Like she's a beautiful, clever, wonderful, amazing person. And she likes to wear lingerie and she will show that. But the amount of times her account's been reported, suspended, all those images have been classed as violent or graphic by Instagram, despite multiple people saying that's not the case. Like it just happens all the time. Actually, there's an English chap called Misha Robbins, but his Instagram handle is Mr. Colitis Crohn's. He's had his TikTok account suspended 3 times for continual breach of their community standards, which is not true, but it just obviously he keeps being reported because he shows his stoma out, without the bag covering it. And people report him all the time.
That's insane.
Yeah.
I think there's other graphic images which are shown which should be blocked, to be honest, like the Kardashians.
Well, exactly. That's the problem. Like, the sort of the standard algorithm of white men and women in swimwear, there's no problem with that. But you make it a disabled person doing it and suddenly it's a problem. It's just the double standard of it is super offensive. And it's kind of similar to what happens as well with plus size models.
Yes.
Who are censored and have things removed constantly as well.
But that's another thing I was reading as well, also with plus sizes. We're on this mission to be sustainable. But again, they are part of the market that's been excluded because no one's actually making sustainable clothes or shoes or accessories for that body shape.
Yeah.
So we want to do good, but we're always discriminating or eliminating whole demographic.
Yeah. And the argument always comes down to, especially with plus size, is it's always cost. So for plus size, the excuse is, well, they need more fabric, it would cost more. But like I know every company adds 5% onto any amount of fabric they order. So they can, there's that buffer within their grading and how they organise their lay plans for cutting. And then with adaptive, where the excuse is also cost in terms of the construction is more because you're putting more zips in or more buttons, but then also you're adding more trims. So that's primarily always the excuse used. But when you think of these companies that have millions of pounds and plenty of resources in zips, it's kind of a bit of a hollow excuse.
Absolutely. How do you think the world is slowly waking up to the issues of ableism, if it is?
I mean, it feels to me like it is because I'm so in it. So I'm seeing every day and noticing every day that people are sort of coming across Unhidden or my advocacy page and asking questions. But then I sort of step out and go, some people really don't even know that some of the phrasing that we use is ableist and, that it's just not in campaigns at all. It does feel like it's changing. I think bigger brands are slowly waking up to it. I know there are conversations happening behind closed doors. They're just not doing it fast enough. I think sort of adaptive fashion now is at the point that plus size fashion probably was 5 years ago, which doesn't say much for either because plus size fashion is still not uniformly addressed, but it's now a topic of conversation. But I think still, I'm not really seeing it in television ads, in beauty ads, as plot lines in films or TV shows where it's not the point of the story is the disability. So that's, it's changing.
And if they are, they're always sort of a secondary character, aren't they?
Yeah, they're never the lead. And if they are the lead, it's about how they've overcome their disability or how they're so inspiring despite all their disabilities. Like it actually just perpetuates a lot of the ableist stereotypes around disability. It's very rarely done from a positive, yes, they're disabled, but they're also doing X, Y, Z that would be incredible, disability or not. That's, I think, what often gets missed.
Absolutely. Is there an adaptive fashion week?
Well, yes and no. I think in New Zealand they tried, and I know Runway of Dreams have tried. There shouldn't really be a separation, it should be included, but I don't think there's definitely not a week. I don't even think there's a day.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there's definitely been attempts. I know Models of Diversity did one in Manchester a few years back, but yeah, it's not something that I've seen consistently.
Tommy Hilfiger from the fashion world was one of the first to actually do adaptive clothing.
Yeah.
Marks and Spencer's, you were saying, had an adaptive line?
Yeah, they did. They had for kids, they had an adaptive range. And then, they just sort of slowly pulled it.
Oh, really? But what do you think fashion schools can do or should do to help How do you feel as educators we can change this perception and get future designers or future people in the industry to be more receptive and more open to adaptive fashion?
I think if they started with maybe bringing in a disabled influencer with an interest in fashion to speak to students, I think there's so much creativity within it. And it's almost, it's like a challenge of, right, how do I make it look like it's like my usual fashion aesthetic, but I make it adaptive? Like there's a lot of fun and a challenge in it that I think would be really fun for students. So I think there's that. Sort of inviting people into the room to have the conversation and then bringing it up and maybe setting it as a research project. Like, if you had to design a pair of trousers for this person that had these needs, what would you do? Because it would spark, I think, so many interesting conversations and ideas and so many ranges, because people with disabilities deserve the same level of choice that non-disabled people have in how they dress and express themselves.
Absolutely. Victoria, what is next for Unhidden Clothing?
Well, hopefully trying to get a bit more mainstream is generally the goal. We're only been open for 3 months, so it's very early days. I'd love to have an in real life sort of launch and invite a lot of people to come along and sort of see the collection, see people wearing the collection and the difference that it will make. And I think just have it represented in the press and make even all of the models that I worked with, some of them have gone on to sort of model for other companies, which is awesome. So I think just sort of raising the profile of the people that also need this clothing. I'm hoping to launch the adaptive alteration service, but for now that's a challenge in terms of having things sent back and forth and not being able to sort of necessarily speak to the people that I'm doing the adaptations for. So then I'm also going to release, once I've been able to get someone in to film me doing the adaptations, because it's really hard to film yourself. I keep trying. So that we can then release sort of 5-minute short how to adapt your own clothing so that people can show it to their local seamstress, their dry cleaners, so that everyone can have access to adaptive clothing. That's sort of another step. And expanding the range, hopefully. I'm launching a Kickstarter. I'm saying it now, I'm going to say it so that I have to stick to it, on the 6th of March, which is only next weekend. And I'm going to have a half-day festival of like different panel discussions around different people's adaptive needs with some people that I've already worked with. And that is going to be in collaboration with Models of Diversity. So it will be a free thing to attend, but if people can donate to Models of Diversity, that's awesome. So that's kind of next. And then just trying to get into physical shops, I think, like not necessarily build my own, much as that is a dream of mine, to be only within shops that are already accessible, though. That's the other problem, is finding stores that are physically accessible anyway.
It's a lot.
But yeah, there's lots to handle.
Well, good luck for everything. Also, when the masks first came out, you actually made transparent masks for deaf people and lip readers.
Yes.
Which again, it's like so obvious when you read about it, but when the mask came out, no one thought about it.
Yeah, that came from, I realized I was struggling and I kept, people pull the mask down to speak to other people because it's muffled. And I was like, but actually, if you can see their mouth, it makes it easier. But that was because I was trying to only use organic cotton and ethical means to make it. And then in the end, like I tried 3 layers of chiffon, 3 layers of organza so that it was see-through, but it was still fabric. It was impossible. So the transparent bit is PVC and then it fogs. So then it was coming up with, how do I stop that? So each mask actually comes with a mini eco soap and you rub that onto the layer, like on the inside, and then it doesn't fog up as much. It's not as good as the government issued ones, but it does work for people that need it. But the bigger problem really is it's not the person who is deaf or has hearing loss. They need everybody else to wear them.
Yes.
That's the bigger problem, is it's great for them, but they need other people to be wearing them too.
True, absolutely. Victoria, thank you so much. Great talking to you this morning, and speak to you soon.
Yeah, speak to you soon, Massimo. Thank you very much for having me.
To find out more about Unhidden Clothing and adaptive fashion, click on the link in the episode show notes. Quick update about the Kickstarter, it will officially be launched on the 12th of March. Thank you for listening to today's episode, and I look forward to inviting you next week to our new episode. So stay tuned, stay safe, and speak soon. Bye.